Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker podcast. Now you may immediately hear that things sound a little bit different, and that's because this entire episode was recorded on location in the middle of nowhere in Bavaria. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you'll probably remember this happened earlier this year. We've been visiting family for Easter, and yet I still wanted to get a show out. So if you notice a slight difference in audio quality, do let me know. I remember last time, surprisingly, a lot of people actually quite liked the recording quality using this cheap little lavalier mic I'm speaking into right now. Some of it was recorded on this mic, some of it was recorded on the GoPro microphone as I was walking through a field. But nonetheless, it is a episode that I'm very happy about. There's a wide range of content in here and some things that are very exciting. Some things I wish I'd spent a little bit more time on. I was very concerned that I was waffling at length and that there'd not be enough space to fit it all into a show. And as it happens, actually, I probably could have gone into a little more detail, as is the way. But then again, that is what the podcast here is for. And in future, the plan is absolutely to spend a little more time on certain subjects here in the podcast where it would not make sense to do so on YouTube. However, given the limited resources I put this episode out on, I decided not to do that today. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoy it a lot. And yeah, let's get on with the show. Up first, we have an inventive take on the UPDI programmer. That is the kind of programmer required in order to program the newer ATtiny line of chips. We're starting by looking at this article on Hackaday, which is about making a DIY UPDI programmer. Now, UPDI is something that you need to program some of the newer ATtiny hardware that's come out, because they are still bringing out new hardware. It's very easy for us to think of a lot of the chips that we use as being kind of unchanging for years and years, but as recently as 2018, ATtiny have been bringing out very cheap and low-powered microcontrollers, which might actually be better for your day-to-day use than an Arduino, depending on your use case. However, UPDI is not a protocol that many people will necessarily be familiar with. In fact, I just had to once again look to see what it actually stood for, which is Unified Programmer and Debug Interface. Now you can buy one of those interfaces, but they're incredibly easy to make. And in fact, inside this interface, this Hackaday article is a great primer for it, but I found the links out of this Hackaday article to the maker's site itself. Inside it, if we scroll up here, you will see it is an Arduino Nano. And just a couple of extra components. So yes, here we are, Arduino Nano and a 4.7 kilo ohm resistor and a tiny little 10 microfarad 10 volt ceramic capacitor. And of course, I forgot the 6-pin angled header as well. And there's a quite nice little hack here. By cutting off one of the legs of this header, you can attach it to the end and then attach the resistor straight to the leg and through. And the maker suggests putting a little daub of glue on there to stop it from moving around when you plug it into things. Now, as the original Hackaday article says, you could argue that using an Arduino Nano for this is a little bit overkill, but given that you can get them for around $1 per unit, especially if you're buying big bags of them from AliExpress or something, it seems like a perfect use for a little board like this. And as this blog article, which is linked out of the main Hackaday article, says, you can use it to, you can use it with Platform IO in order to work with Platform IO, AVR Dude, and Microchip Studio. Oh, see, Microchip Studio via AVR Dude. And in fact, it goes into a lot more detail in the blog post here. I noticed somewhere further down here, talks about, using AVR Dudes, which is something I wasn't actually familiar with. This is a GUI for AVR Dude that somehow I've never heard of before. We might have to come back and talk about this at some point in the future. And of course, there is using Platform IO as well. If you are interested in making one of these for yourself, because at the end of the day, of course, it requires very few parts and it isn't that difficult to make, but you're put off by the fact that you would have to use either Microchip Studio or Platform IO and you want to use the Arduino IDE, you absolutely can. There is a library out there which will allow you to do that. In fact, it is here. I will also link this in the description. It is called Mega Tiny Core, and it gives Arduino support for all tiny AVR 0, 1, and 2 series chips. Anyhow, in terms of small projects that are quite nice, I like this. It's just, a good use for an Arduino Nano, nice little 3D printed case, and what looks in the end like a fairly and thoroughly professional programmer now that will work with a bunch of different ATtiny chips. If you are someone that works with the ATtiny quite a lot, do let me know in the comments of this video. I actually have a little bag of ATtiny chips I bought specifically to start messing around with and seeing if I could replace Arduinos with them, making some beautiful little circuits, and I haven't really got around to using them. At the end end of the day, when I do prototype things at the minute, it's usually using some kind of ESP32 or ESP8266 because I want that connectivity built in. But yes, there's a bunch of stuff you can do with them, and this seems like a really lovely, simple way to program it. Incidentally, it's kind of a thing that I am a fan of and that I keep meaning to come back to. I keep meaning to write up the tutorial for it. The only way I am able to program my STM32 boards, because I've been learning free RTOS on them, is by using an STM32 board as a programmer, because up until very recently I haven't owned an ST-Link, or at least I owned an ST-Link and I lent it to someone a long time ago. If you are a long-time viewer of the Electromaker Show, you probably already know Matt. He runs the YouTube channel Not Enough Tech, which goes from strength to strength. It's getting more and more popular, as it deserves to, because his content is incredibly detailed, and it's always a pleasure to watch. Every video also has an extensive blog post attached to it as well. However, this particular video struck me as being something very close to my side of the interests as well, because yes, it's about 3D printing and the loudness thereof. This is a fantastic walkthrough of how you can take your 3D printer and turn it into something that's actually usable in terms of volume if you don't have a dedicated 3D printing space. So what do we mean by quiet 3D printing? Well, here is a example. And I don't want to ruin the surprise, but a warning for headphone users. This is going to go from quiet to a little bit loud, because we go from 3D printers, which are not usually quiet, into Matt's intro music, which is not actually particularly loud, but the contrast is quite stunning. Yeah, that introduction is kind of says it all, really. I don't know, the eagle-eared, I guess, among you may have noticed that you can hear Matt quietly breathing in the background in that introduction. It is a marvel, considering that I've almost given up on FDM printing, really, at this stage, because of the time it takes in order to print something, and the fact that the only place in my life I can have my FDM printer is in the same room where I record the Electromaker Show, where I also do all of my work. It's just become a non-starter for me. I can just about get away with resin printing, because although there's the odd noxious gas in the air that I blow out of the way with fans, it's relatively quiet. But this is just a revelation. So the video itself goes through the modifications to both an Ender 3 and an Ender 3 version 2. They're both Creality, I always call them Creality, 3D printers. And as with all of Matt's videos, it is thorough, it is well explained. We are big fans of Not Enough Tech, and he has been a big fan of our show for quite some time, pretty much since the very start, which is very, very nice. If by some amazing factor you are actually aware of the Electromaker Show and not already aware of Matt and the Not Enough Tech channel and blog, as you are looking at right now, it's definitely worth adding to your list, because yeah, he's very thorough and just seems like a thoroughly nice chap as well. Also an active member of our Discord, which is a nice way for me to plug it, by the way. If you would like to join our Discord, Matt is in there and active. You can ask him any questions you have about this video. He recently also posted another link to another video of his he's just put out, which I haven't had a chance to check out yet, actually. I'll have to have a look at that. But yes, this video goes through all the modifications that you can make to any 3D printer, really. This is talking about the Ender 3, but of course, 3D printers are much of a muchness at this point. A lot of things are cross-compatible, and if not, you can usually make it work yourself. And there is a lovely Noctua fan. The same fans that I have inside my computer, actually, because I have a relatively quiet desktop computer in the Attic of Dreams at home for the exact reason that I have to record quite a lot. But yes, another fantastic video from Not Enough Tech. And if you are someone who uses FDM printing and has experimented with making printers quiet and have any input onto this, please do let me know. It's something that I am very interested in doing because ultimately, yeah, as I say, I've pretty much given up on FDM printing for this exact reason. And if you are someone who knows a bit more about it, please do let me know. Up next, we have a DIY punch paper tape reader, which is one of those wonderful projects that blends the old with the new. So this paper tape reader is very cool indeed, not only because it is taking an old concept and updating it, which is something that I know a lot of you love to see, but because of the way that it works, because it is fiendishly simple in a way, but because of the simplicity of the way it's been designed, it means that it can take almost any kind of punched paper tape as its input. So this is obviously a microcontroller just here, and it is attached via USB to the computer. There's a calibration button here, and what happens when the calibration button is pressed is you can pull any kind of tape through it, and it will use the onboard analog readings it gets from all of the different photoresistors to determine what should be a 1 and what should be a 0. Because ultimately, these paper punches you see here are just 1s and 0s. This was binary storage before there was storage. Although I guess it wasn't before it was storage, because it is storage. Anyway, linked out from this Hackaday article is a link to the website of eBasteln, solving yesterday's problems today. I really love that. And this gives you a very clear idea about how this thing works. You have a bunch of photo sensors here that attach to the microcontroller, and then you have a bunch of LEDs here that are pointing at the photo sensor, and then in between is where the tape runs through. And perhaps now you can see why not only is it such a wonderfully simple system, that's how it's able to self-calibrate as well, because at the end of the day, there's only really going to be two distinct states that it can be in, and if you hold the calibrate button down and pull it through, then it's going to know that the higher or lower of the two is the other one of the two. Oh my gosh, I could have explained that so much better, but there you go. Yeah, I really love this idea because it is taking an old idea and doing something new with it, but also because it's proving that you can have a relatively simple approach to something and actually come up with something incredibly usable. As it says, I can't remember if it says it somewhere here or on the original Hackaday page, it should have no problem reading up to 500 somethings per second. Where were we? 500 characters per second isn't a problem if the device has had a chance to calibrate, which is not that shabby whatsoever. Presumably that means you'll be able to use this pretty much as fast as you can pull it through. It's also an aesthetically pleasing little device as well. If you would like to know more about it, I'm going to link the Hackaday article because that links through to the maker's website as well. One side effect of using this particular microcontroller as well, it's a Pro Micro, means that you could technically use it as a USB host, and you could actually punch out on paper something that you wanted to type and then use the microcontroller to just send keystrokes to the computer, which I think is quite a nice idea. If you want to think of some kind of really kind of down-to-earth and simple form of two-factor authentication or password security, you could have this little thing plugged into the computer, and you and only you own the paper or plastic strip that you pull through it in order to type your password in for you. It's a silly idea, but it's quite a fun one, isn't it? Just as we head into funding website things, which is the part of the show where we talk about things on funding websites, just a quick notice, there isn't any competition this week. That wasn't actually planned. I wasn't actually planning to do this show from a field either, but the time that we spent down in Bavaria ended up being just a little bit longer, not for bad reasons, just family reasons, and so I don't actually have a mystery box in which to plunge my hand and pull out a mystery prize. However, the mystery box prize will return next week. We also have a couple of quite interesting and cool giveaways coming up in the next few weeks as well. So while we're missing a giveaway on this show, hopefully we will make up for it in the coming weeks. Anyhow, the first thing on funding website this week is from Kickstarter, and it's been a while since we've done anything on Kickstarter. And interestingly, this project was actually brought to my attention by the creator of the project, who didn't actually reach out for me just to tell me about the Kickstarter. It was sort of an interesting coincidence. Anyhow, this is Noctis and Aurel, which are tiny robots looking for makers. Now, Noctis and Aurel are tiny robots looking for makers. This is a Kickstarter that's actually from someone who's part of the Electromaker community. And they reached out to me on Discord, and they actually reached out to me because they won the mystery box prize. They won one of our prizes that we give away every week on the Electromaker Show. And they reached out and said, we have a Kickstarter. We're actually making these tiny robots that are designed to be educational, and we have an ongoing Kickstarter. And so as you can see, they're about halfway to their goal. By the time you see this, there's going to be very little time for the Kickstarter to keep going. So if you do want to pledge to support them, now would be the time. But yes, this is a microbit compatible robot kit, and you can watch the video right here. But let's scroll down and have a look at some of the details. So essentially you have a set of 3D printed parts and some high torque PWM servos. As previously mentioned, it uses the microbit in order to control it, and it has a carrier board that you can attach these to, and then this attaches out to the servos as well. Now, one of the things I find super interesting about this project is that there's a real story element to it. They have this thing called the Locoverse, which is literally the universe in which these robots are supposed to have existed. There's lore behind these robots, and I think it's such a fascinating thing. As you can see here, they have sort of Pokemon-esque cards you can gather, and lots of information, and learn about the origin of our robots, as it says here, with these beautiful little drawings, as you can see. And it's also worth mentioning at this stage that while this is a microbits project in some ways, because it works with make code, as you probably saw as I scrolled down, there's the familiar block-based programming, environment, I suppose, is what you would call it, the Microsoft Make Code platform. But you can, of course, use any board to program this. If you really wanted to go hard mode, I'm sure you could do some bare metal system on chip or MCU and attach that to the local board. But that's obviously not the point here. This is meant to be a STEAM project, a learning project, and probably the best way you could learn this is by going the easiest route, because ultimately you learn best when you actually achieve something. But yes, a pair of quadrupedal robots designed for learning. As the Kickstarter here says, they are a growing robotics company based in Spain. This is clearly a project with a lot of passion behind it. They've put a lot of thought into it and a lot of work into it. If you do come to this page, do come all the way down to here, because they do actually give a little bit more information about their ideas for how they want to push the platform in an educational direction, as well as just actually get these particular robots out. This clearly isn't a product that they're trying to sell and have done with. This is a platform that will continue to grow. So if you would like to support them, the early maker kit is €99 here on Kickstarter. However, as I have said, if you are interested in supporting them, I would get to it very soon, because at the time of recording this, there's only 5 days to go, and by the time you see it, there'll probably be even less than that. But this is a really lovely project. As I previously mentioned, I only heard about this because it just so happened that the maker of this project is a viewer of the Electromaker Show, and they won the mystery box prize. So I contacted them to say, hey, get in touch about the prize, and they were like, actually, do you know we have a Kickstarter? And yeah, it's wonderful. It seems like such a lovely project, and I'm very glad to be able to give them a little bit of a signal boost on the Electromaker Show. Moving over to Crowd Supply now, and a project which will really appeal to anyone who is a fan of the Raspberry Pi Pico and the RP2040 chip that it that it runs on. But this is something that allows you to get a little bit more precision, and to turn the Raspberry Pi Pico into a genuine test tool, or something that could be used in a variety of slightly more higher precision environments. So this is a pre-launch page on Crowd Supply, and it is for plain DAQ. And this is a DAQ module for the Raspberry Pi Pico. Now, we've talked about DAQs on the show before. I reviewed a fantastic DAQ from Measurement Computing, which was a hat for the Raspberry Pi. Essentially what a DAQ will do is give you high precision inputs and high precision outputs for systems that don't necessarily have that normally. In this case, it gives you 12-bit 500,000 samples per second analog to digital conversion going into the Pico, a 10-bit DAQ going out of the Pico, plus minus 5 volts to offer a bipolar power supply, which, as it says here, is typically difficult to generate. The other thing that is sort of interesting here is the fact that it has an option for an ESP32 based wireless communication with it, which means that essentially you get a 2-for-1 here. You're adding wireless capabilities to your Raspberry Pi Pico, but you also get all of this fantastic conversion based into the board itself. Now, it says here, use cases. There's various use cases. The very first thing that I thought of is music, of course. The things that this adds to a Raspberry Pi Pico mean that this could be the absolute bread and butter of anything you could ever really want to do with, let's say, a Eurorack module, if you wanted to make a synthesizer module or something. It is the missing link there, because the Raspberry Pi Pico in and of itself is fantastic, but it is missing a few things like true analog out and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, 4 multiplex channels of 12-bit input, as you see here. There's a few other things. If you would like to find out more, you can head to the pre-launch page here. As I mentioned, it is pre-launch, so there's no price yet. It will be coming soon. If you'd like to know more about it, you can always enter your name into the box here. But I will, of course, be coming back to this, because I would like to know how much this thing is going to cost when it comes out. I would like to get my hands on one of these. But plain DAQ, a simple open source DAQ module for the Raspberry Pi Pico. The Electromaker Show is supported entirely by the Electromaker store. At electromaker.io we have a shop which sells pretty much everything from everyone, from your basic beginner Arduino starter kits right up to some quite industrial level professional equipment. We don't have a Patreon, we don't take donations, we don't even run adverts on our YouTube videos. So if you would like to support us, it is absolutely the best way that you can do so. There's no obligation, of course. This podcast is and always will be a free thing that we put out for people. But yes, if you would like to support us, that is how you can do it. Anyhow, let's get on with the rest of the show. So we're going to end out the show just with a few interesting things I saw on the internet over the past week. And one of those things is the Pine Audio dev board. Now, Pine64 are a company that I've been following for quite some time. And somehow I managed to miss their April Fools that turned out not to be an April Fool's gag this year. But yeah, there's a bunch of really interesting stuff that has come out of Pine64 and the community around them. But this might be the most interesting one so far. Now, at the time, the Pine Buds and Pine Pod April Fools, but not April Fools really, passed me by, which is weird. I follow what Pine64 do quite closely a lot of the time, and I have no idea how this one got past me. But yes, what you'd think was an April Fool's actually turns out to be a very real idea. And it's not surprising in some ways, because Pine64 have been doing this for a while. The Pine Phone is the best, honest-to-God, try to have a Linux and open hardware, or at least an open phone, as open as you can have one. Apart from the possibility of maybe the Fairphone, but that, I don't know, we could argue about that for a long time. But as far as the principle goes, I can't think of anyone doing quite what Pine64 is, at least doing it as well as they are. And so, yes, in a way, maybe the Pine Buds was always an inevitability. However, this blog post is fantastic. It's worth reading through to understand what's going on here. Yes, the whole thing of just the thing saying, no, this is not a joke, this is real. But to actually talk about it, let's go over to CNX Software. Because, as always, they have a really good take on this, which essentially just gives you all of the details you need to know. So this is a development board for developing open source Bluetooth audio hardware. It's based on the Best Technic BES 2300 Bluetooth 5.0 chip. And has a bunch of inputs and outputs. And as you can see here, it is an ARM Cortex M4F chip, and it can work with Bluetooth 5 dual mode, hybrid ANC, active noise cancellation, and there's a bunch of different inputs and outputs onto this, and that's because the Pine Buds themselves are going to have a bunch of different microphones on in order to have active noise cancellation. These are going to be as fully featured as any closed source set of buds that you can get. But this project depends entirely on the community surrounding it. That's exactly how this will work. If people are interested in making it work, it will happen. But it's all open source. This is all people putting their time in to make it. And if the product becomes a reality, then that would be absolutely wonderful. But yeah, not everything that Pine has put out has worked as well as that. But if you would like to know more about it, I will of course leave a link in the description to this CNX Software article, including the blog post from Pine64 themselves. But it's a very exciting thing to me to have a dedicated audio board from Pine64, even if this is more based on the sort of streaming audio and the kind of, the things that you would use to connect your phone to your ears and the earbuds that everyone, including me, seems to use these days. It's still very exciting to have a dedicated audio board like this, and one that you can, of course, put Raspberry Pi hats on, as you can see the GPIOs just here as well. Up next, Vintage Computer Festival East. And as the name suggests, this is the East Coast version of the Vintage Computer Festival that happens in the United States. Something that usually I wouldn't really bring attention to because such a small proportion of our audience would actually be able to go and visit and be there in person for these events. However, like so many events in recent times, it's gone partially online, and there's a huge amount of content you're going to be able to access, and it's happening this weekend. So the Vintage Computer Festival East is usually something that wouldn't really apply to at least me and I think a large number of viewers of the Electromaker Show. However, if you do happen to live in New York or New Jersey, it's actually right in your neighborhood. But yes, this is, like so many shows have been, a hybrid show. There will be an in-person show, but there's also going to be a bunch of stuff happening online. The themes for this year's Vintage Computer Festival East are 1, women in computing, and 2, computers for the masses. Now, there is way too many awesome things happening at the Vintage Computer Festival East this year for me to go into too many specifics. One thing I will point out is that on the schedule, of the people who are talking, this is an absolute murderer's row of just incredible people. For example, Albert Charpentier, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing, was the person that created the VIC and VIC-2 chips inside the Commodore 64. In fact, all of these people have been employees of Commodore at some point over time. There is a bunch of different people here that are interesting, but again, before I even get lost in that list, just looking at the schedule itself is really interesting. There's just so many things from specifics, obviously a lot to do with Commodore, but also just modern tools for working with retro computing, how to work with old computers in modern settings and making them relevant. Was one of the talks as well, which if I remember correctly was just how to listen to the tale of the first national video game tournament held. Yes, problems, lack of foresight, and how Atari sent underage kids across the country to compete because they didn't think a 16-year-old would win a regional, which I think is fantastic. Yeah, that's the one that jumped out to me when I first saw it. This is going to be a really interesting thing, and I have a feeling that anyone who's sort of into the idea of vintage computers, even if you want someone who used them at the time, will find a lot to love here. And all of these links are linked directly from this first page that I had here, that I was showing you here. So I will leave a link to this one in the description of the video. If you are someone who is planning to digitally attend Vintage Computer Festival East, please do let me know in the comments of this video, and please do head to the Discord server, because this is happening April 22nd, 23rd and 24th. At the time of recording this, that's just a few days away. And provided I have the time, I would like to actually try and view some of the digital online events, and maybe we could meet up in the Discord and do that together if it would be a possible thing to do. Who knows, we can give it a try. Anyway, Vintage Computer Festival East, there are so many words in that sentence I like. I mean, I even quite like the word East. Our final section this week doesn't fit into the regular Electromaker Show canon, but I couldn't really let it go by. Because yes, you may have heard of DJs spinning wax, but have you ever heard of DJs spinning reel-to-reel tape? To close out this week's show, something that isn't strictly actually microcontrollers, it strictly isn't anything to do with the Electromaker Show, but I thought it was so wonderful I wanted to briefly share it with you. This, as you can see, is something I found on the Adafruit blog, and this is reel-to-reel DJs. Yes, if you are someone who is into music that is played by DJs, you will know that there is a certain snobbery when it comes to people who use vinyl over CDs, or even, as most people do these days, uses a laptop, as if using that makes you somehow better at choosing music, which is exactly what a DJ should do at the end of the day. However, one has to admit that this is pretty damn impressive. And yeah, if you think vinyl's hard, these are reel-to-reel DJs. Ah! It is mind-bendingly hard to beat match, even with vinyl, to be perfectly honest, but to do it with a tape-to-tape, with a reel-to-reel tape system like this, as this guy is in the 1991 Hammersmith DMC World Championships elimination round at the Hammersmith Palais de Danse in London. Yeah, it's just an incredible thing, isn't it? So yeah, the full video, as you can see, is linked in the Adafruit blog here. I will link this Adafruit blog, as it is where I saw it in the first place, but the video itself is on the DNB Radio Drum and Bass YouTube channel. But yes, obviously this video has been slightly different to the usual Electromaker fare. Easter has shanghaied my plans ever so slightly. But yes, this hasn't been your regular Electromaker show, so I thought, why don't we put something in that isn't quite your regular Electromaker content, because what a wonderful thing that this is. I hope you've had a great Easter, and yes, I will be back in the Attic of Dreams next week, and I will see you then. So that has been our episode for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for all of the podcast listeners who have got in touch with me over the last little while, just to say how much they do enjoy listening to this. I've heard all kinds of stories of people listening to this on the way to work, when they're out running, which is nice for me because I'm also a runner. It's nice to know that people are doing, well, I recorded bits of this show today while I was out on my run. I got to a nice field and got my breath back, and then got the GoPro out and did all of the links between all the sections mid-run. So to know that other people are running around while listening to it makes me feel good. Also, to those of you who do not like running and hate running, I absolutely sympathize. I used to be like that, and I unfortunately got horrifically addicted to running. But that is our show for this week. There's, as I said last week, there's ideas in the pipeline for maybe interviewing a few people. I'm sort of in the process of working out how that might work. So one of the things that I thought I might just put out there now is that if there is a maker, be it a YouTube personality or just someone who you think does interesting work, who may not have much of a public kind of persona online, but you would like to hear interviewed, perhaps drop me an email at ian@electromaker.io, or drop into the Discord server, and just under the general tab you can talk in there about the podcast. It's about everything to do with the show or anything Electromaker at all. And let me know who you'd like to hear from. If there's anyone specifically you'd be interested in me approaching to do some kind of informal chat/interview as a bonus podcast episode. Anyhow, that is it for this week's show. I hope the audio quality has been all right for you. We'll be resuming our normal show next week when I get back home. Take care. I hope you have a fun, safe, and creative week, and I'll speak to you then.